Readers, it'd be very nice to see you again, and members, I hope you'll enjoy this next issue of Pennant, and that's what we're here to talk about today. You all enthusiastically greeted this last issue, and in that I flagged up that my intention to depart as your General Secretary and to start a third career, so I'm joined in this edition of Pennant by John Pitt-Brooke, who is my successor as General Secretary of the Forces Pension Society, but he's also co-editor for this issue, and I'll introduce you to John in a minute. We've got a bumper issue this time, and it's on Britain's place in the world. And you see this beautiful blue sky, blue sea picture of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary refuelling 2 ships of the Royal Navy, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, I'd like to introduce you to John Pitt-Brooke, who is taking over as General Secretary. And John, what are your first views of Pennant? You've seen it now for the first time. What do you think?
Well, as someone brand new to the magazine and to the material, I've been very impressed indeed by the range of articles and by their quality. In terms of the range, there's a core of issues around pensions, which is, of course, what the Society is all about. And this is a very exciting and complicated time for pensions, and we've got to keep our members very close to that, and that's well covered. But around that core, there's a whole range of material on a range of defence subjects, which we think will entertain and stimulate our readership. And in terms of the quality, I think it's very impressive indeed that we've been able to get these people to write for us, some of whom have national or indeed international reputations. If I had to describe Pennant in 3 words, I'd say it's a good read.
Yeah, that's nice and encouraging. Thank you. Well, that's what most of you, our members, say. So let's go into this issue. That's what it'll look like. For those who get it in paper form, it'll thump down in the post box because it's got an extra 30% of pages in, so much more for you to read this time. And our place in the world is exemplified by the Royal Fleet Auxiliary giving worldwide reach to the Royal Navy. We've got Howard Wealdon talking about Britain's defence posture with a strategic defence and security review coming up in the wake of, or during, in fact, the general election. We have the British Council, which will tell you all about the demand for our culture worldwide and the great work that does. We've got how we look after this country of ours, the stewardship of the land from John Varley and the Clinton Devon estates. That's all about farming and forestry and sustainable use of the land that God has given us. How we chart and map that, the Ordnance Survey tells us about what they do today. And of course, last time we had Ian Curry on weather forecasting. That was sort of what you see up in the clouds and sky and be your own weather forecaster. This time we're following that up with the Meteorological Office, and they're telling us really how our climate is altering. And in the same way as the stewardship of our land, they're telling us a bit about the stewardship of our climate. Of course, we can't just look at Britain's place in the world today without looking at where we've come from, and there are a couple of interesting historical articles. John, you perhaps might like to mention those.
Yeah, there are 2 articles about Waterloo, a pair of articles which are particularly compelling. One by Bob Kershaw, which is a very good brief account of the battle itself and what happened and what the strategic and tactical issues were. Another, a heartbreakingly sad account of a story I'd never heard before, about a woman, Magdalene de Launcy, whose husband was tragically killed at Waterloo, and the account of the circumstances about that and how she received the news and how she went to his side as he lay dying, it's a real tearjerker, and it's a very good account of the pressures that people face in the battlefield then and indeed now.
And then we sort of look a bit about actually who we are as a nation, and that good old stalwart Thomas Keelinger, who you will remember did the interview with me on the Roots of Friendship Remembered, grew up as a refugee child in Germany, was nourished by Cadbury's chocolate thrown from the British troop trains. He's written for us a really outstanding assessment in the form of brotherly chiding. He's known this country for 40 years. He loves it as much as we do and cares for it as much as we do. And you'll be a bit shocked about what he writes about us, what he sees in us as a divided country, partly in the wake of the Scottish independence vote, but also in the advent of a very fractured general election. And these and articles like this clothe our theme of Britain in the world. We're about to redefine ourselves in political terms as well. And Thomas picks all that up in a really heavyweight article to see ourselves as others see us. Then we've got our usual interest in things overseas. Mungo Melvin tells us why we should expect the Russians to act as Russians and why they invaded Crimea, when actually Crimea is the Portsmouth of the Russian Navy, the Pompey of the Russian Navy, the birthplace of the Russian Navy, and it is absolutely intolerable to any Russian that Sevastopol should belong to anybody except Russia. So we can't be surprised at that. And keeping the Ukrainian theme, Keith Best has come back now as you remember, he was leading victims of torture. He's now an election monitor, and he's been in the Ukraine doing the election monitoring there. And I mean, what hope has democratic change got in that part of the world? Let's move back to history. And of course, everybody's celebrating the First World War at the moment. I think after we've had 5 years of the First World War, we will be pretty sick of the whole thing. But 1915 was the year of realism, of disappointment, of despair almost, very well written about by Lynn MacDonald, and she has given us one of her articles for us to reproduce on Fred Carnot's army, which is really the change that happened in 1915 from after the rubbing out of the British regular army, the beginning of conscription, Kitchener's new armies, and she's written a very good article for us there. Sticky Whitchurch is with us again. Now, Sticky knows how to get the best out of battlefield studies, and it's a good article. I went to be the guest speaker at the final dinner of a course that Sticky did for people who were conducting battlefield tours, and I must say they did a 2-week course and they learnt a lot and they gave a lot. And there is a way of doing this properly. It's not just touring. It is good study with good results. Waterloo, John has already spoken about that, but of course that great battle defined the Europe that we see today. And then pensions, of course. We have to remind ourselves, well, no, we don't really have to remind ourselves of an absolute core, but some of you demand more on pensions, and some of you are perfectly satisfied and demand lesser pensions. So we try to find that way in between. The new Armed Forces pension scheme started this April, and of course a third scheme with people on 3 schemes makes it all much more complicated and makes our work harder in explaining that to you in the Armed Forces and you, our members. The new thing that is coming up is the Ministry of Defence Pensions Board, and this is going to be a new departure, and of course it's going to strike at the autocracy of the Ministry of Defence in the pensions world. And I'd like John just to pick up the thread on that board, if you would, John.
Well, this is a new and really significant piece of organisation. As I explain introducing myself in this issue, my own background is not actually in the armed forces as such, but as a civil servant in the Ministry of Defence. And I know very well how the Ministry of Defence works, and I know how difficult it can be to get certain items to the top of the collective agenda of ministers and the people who run the Ministry of Defence. And this is a way of doing that. And at a time when pensions will be even more complicated than ever, at a time of political uncertainty following the election, and who knows what world we'll find ourselves in a few weeks and months' time, this will be a way of making sure that pensions issues are dealt with at a high level of the Ministry of Defence, and that the voice of the Forces Pension Society will be heard loud and clear at that board, when we will be carrying out our key role, which is to represent the interests of our members and of the armed forces as a whole, and providing a strong and informed and independent view. And that will be one of my priorities when I take on this role.
Thank you, John. I mean, I can think of nobody better to be able to match the MOD in the knowledge and be a leading proponent of armed forces pension in that board. The Pensions Regulator has written for us as well, and you really ought to know why the Pension Regulator has an important role in public sector pensions like ours. There are, of course, major changes in pensions outside the public sector. And our advice to you is that you shouldn't worry about this at all. It won't affect your armed forces pension. So don't get worried about it. But if you're on your second career, you will need to be concerned about those changes, about the removal of the need to buy annuities or to control drawdown in the same way. So get to know those changes. And Anthony Harding, one of our affinity partners, Anthony has laid all that out for you in an article. But the chief response to those of you who are members of the Society with Armed Forces pensions, to the major changes in pensions of the last few days, the chief response is do nothing, and do nothing quickly. If you are senior in rank, or if you're on your second career, then do watch the lifetime allowance. Speak to us and we will put you in touch with. We will tell you if you're vulnerable for extra taxation, and then we'll put you in touch with somebody like Anthony Harding who can advise you as how to mitigate, not avoid, not evade, mitigate the tax charges which will arise on you. And we've got lots to entertain you as well. I must commend this fantastic article by Louise Pragnell. It's an interview with me, with her. What a delightful lady. She's a portraitist. If you want to have a portrait like that of an elegant lady like your wife or your daughter, you'll have to decide between an upmarket car or a picture. It's not cheap, but Louise is a fantastic lady who does beautiful portraits, and I think you'll really enjoy my interview with her as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. Then we've got an article on Africa with the Welsh Guards. That's been written by Charles Abel, and Charles Abel has been our magazine consultant ever since we changed the masthead from a variegated form to this. Charles came in at this point here with Margaret Thatcher and the pensioners, and he's guided us all the way through, and he's been generally encouraging of our ideas rather than telling us to do this or telling us to do that. And we've maximised the creativity in-house. We've got an article from the City and the Worshipful Company of Parish Clerks. David Roberts, one of our regular contributors, has written to that. And we've got some interesting in-house authors on bell ringing and beekeeping. Our Assistant General Secretary keeps bees and produces honey, and Anthony Henderson, our Assistant Pensions Secretary, is an avid bell ringer, and those are both things that you might think of doing. And then, of course, we try to show a bit of a social conscience with Pennant. We've got an article by the Brilliant Club, which brings children out of rather difficult inner city circumstances and gets them top-level qualifications to send them on their way to university. One of my fellow deputy lieutenants in East Sussex, who is a great proponent of the hospice movement, has written what I think we will all find a very good article on end-of-life care. Now, if you've got parents who are getting older, even getting to my age and beyond, then you need to know about end-of-life care. And it's just not something just for old people. You need to think about how you're going to shape your life as it moves on, because death and taxation, not just the lifetime allowance, are those two things which we can be absolutely certain of. And then immigration, a key debate in politics at the moment. Lord Jonathan Sacks, I think you will all know of, you will have heard him on Thought for the Day, was the chief rabbi. He has written a very humane and understanding piece about Britain, Britain's role as a place for asylum seekers and refugees. And he describes Britain as a kingdom of kindness. Are we still a kingdom of kindness? Should we be a kingdom of kindness? Where does that put UKIP and other immigration policy ideas in? I think everybody should read what Jonathan Sacks has got to say, and I think it's a really well-found piece. And we try to give you stuff that's useful. We've got an article on coroners' courts. You might think that's completely irrelevant, but actually you may find yourself in a coroner's court. Why might you find yourself in a coroner's court? How might you find yourself in a coroner's court? And what should you expect from a coroner's court? And we've got a good article from you from the Army Legal Services on that. And if you've been messed about on the trains, either at Christmas or bank holiday, because of engineering work, Spare a thought for Network Rail, because they've written for us to explain just what it is they do, what they're trying to do, and they have taken some of the more egregious public relations disasters head on and explained actually what happened, how it happened. And I think after reading this article, you can only about have some sympathy with them. Nuclear power, where do you stand on nuclear power? You can be as green as you like, but there's nothing greener than nuclear power. That's the contrast and paradox of British energy policy. And because all our power stations are aging, the lights are going to go out in the near future unless something more than wind farms are put in their place. And of course we did an article on wind farms, you remember that, and some members weren't very keen on that, so we followed it up with an article on microgeneration from streams and rivers, and that got a bit more of a popular vote. Big data. Do you understand what big data is? Every time you swipe, tap, or offer a plastic card, somebody is collecting data on you. And that all, it becomes an amalgam together. And the Oxford Internet Institute are the real experts at this, and they've written for us on big data what it is and actually what it can help with. And they're writing an article on the use of big data in Alzheimer's research, and I think you'll find that very interesting. And then I must take my leave of you. I will be handing over to John, and I wish him well. That's not the baton quite passed. He's got to look at the accounts first of all, but we've got a page on the accounts, and I think you'll agree the accounts are in a very robust, very fine form. There have been years when I couldn't have said that to you, but I'm quite happy to say that, knowing the auditors are coming in this afternoon smiling. And then, as I say, I will have to take my leave of you with mixed feelings, of course, but it's time to go. You've received Pennant with evident pleasure. We have been inundated, especially after the last issue, with nice comments, which we really find very rewarding. But it now needs a fresh touch, as all things do. But before I go and depart, I just want to draw your attention back to this shirt, because two of you on the last issue said that you couldn't take your eyes off this shirt. What is this shirt? This shirt is two sale mistakes at the same time. One shirt with short sleeves and one shirt with extra long sleeves. And I got a dressmaker to join them together. I'm glad you like it. And I will see if Charles Tyrwhitt wants to buy the patent from me. Thank you very much. I wish you a really good read. This is a cracking bumper issue, and I hope you will really enjoy it and encourage my successor, John, here as much as you've encouraged me. Thank you.